Chapter 3. Satap, I called the male nurse sitting near my head. The ambulance was driving at high speed. The passengers' heads were bobbing. The blare of siren only sent more headaches up my head. I had been carried onto the solid spinal board before being lifted onto the gurney. Yes, Doc. He turned to look at me with a look of concern. We'll reach the hospital in no time. Report, 30-year-old male patient. I was about to say what I wanted to say, but the emergency medical technician voice interrupted me. His mouth hovered above a black radio communication in his hand, providing information to the ER. A neighbor notified us that he fainted, head hitting the floor, unconscious. Evaluation on arrival. Awake. O2 sat, 100%. E4, V5, M6, DTX, 101. An open wound on the left side of his forehead. The neighbor said that I fainted and my head hit the ground? I frowned. Satap, I called out to him for a second time. Who called the ambulance? Satap shook his head. I don't know. Have to ask the notified person. I only heard that it was your neighbor who was with you at the time. Can you remember? Of course I remember. Why wouldn't I? That person was not my neighbor. He was the killer. When you arrived, did you see the person who made the call? No. I came and saw you were alone. It's quite strange, though. Satap, who was a few years older than me, uttered, with a skeptical look on his face. Did something happen? I was beyond glad that someone had noticed something fishy in this situation. I didn't faint. I was assaulted. Satap widened his eyes. Are you serious? Since the distance between the hospital and my house was not far from each other, I arrived at the hospital within a few minutes. The dialogue between Satap and I was cut short when the ambulance came to a stop. Both Satap and the EMT staff lost no time opening the door and lowered me, who was still lying on the gurney, down the ambulance. What happened next was complete and utter chaos. I was quickly pushed into the emergency room. A male intern who was on duty tonight rushed to me, 2 nurses trailing behind him. I closed my eyes from the intense dizziness. Professor Bunn, the intern called my name. I tried to open my eyes to look. One of the nurses rolled up my sleeves to check my blood pressure. Professor, can you hear me? Yeah, I replied softly. He started to examine my body from head to toe. When he was confident that there were no fatal threats that needed prompt attention, he turned to shoot a question at me. What happened? I rested my hand over my head, debating whether or not I should tell the truth of the incident. However, since my life was in danger, I decided that it would be best if someone else was aware that this wasn't just an accident. Regarding the details that the intruder might be the one who killed Jane Jera, I would save this piece of information for the cops. Someone came into my house, banging my head on the floor and knocking me out. There was an expression of shock on his face. The nurse said you have fainted and hit your head on the way down. So that's not what it was, right? Professor, do you remember his face? I shook my head, closing my eyes, owning to a series of headaches and nausea. The intern shined a flashlight in my iris once again just to be sure. How do you feel right now? Any headache? Nausea? Blurred vision? Intense headache. Nausea too. Puked in the ambulance many times. The intern nodded in acknowledgement. We need a CT scan in this case. I'll book the CT scan for you. If the staff knows it's you, they'll probably put you first in the queue soon. Please wait a moment. After this, he hurriedly walked away from my gurney and headed to the nurse station. My eyes trailed after him. Inside, I felt more anxious about the intruder more than my own head injury. I was most likely diagnosed with a head injury at risk for intracerebral hemorrhage that required a CT scan. After this, I would probably have to stay in a hospital for further observation. I should wait for the treatment to finish. Once I got to rest on the ward, I would suspend the line of my stolen cell phone and find a way to reach Captain Aim. It would have been easier if I spoke with him directly, because he should be the one who understands the situation at hand. And don't even think you can trust the cops. This statement would creep into my mind whenever I thought of the police. fueling my apprehension. I was in a quiet, cold room. The only sound here was the sound of an old air conditioner installed overhead. The wound on my forehead had already been stitched up, hiding under the gauze. The back of my right hand was tethered by a needle, hooking to IVs and a bottle of saline. I was brought into a special room in the surgery department of the hospital after the CT scan results came out. Fortunately, there was no sign of cerebral bleed. I would be resting in the hospital for a short while if there were no complications. I was glad that I was staying here. The hospital was safe. Surely no one could bring me harm here. I intended to press a nurse call button and borrow a mobile phone as I had planned. I also had to use the internet to find information about how to suspend the line. So I reached out for the call cord on the head of the headboard. My finger hovered just above the button when there was a knock on the door. I jumped slightly because of the loud and strong knocking sound. The door opened to reveal a tall man with a familiar handsome face. Pert? My eyes widened, startled. I looked at the clock on the wall. Almost midnight. How did you know? Hey, why wouldn't I know if my best pal was hospitalized? Pert dragged a chair from the dining table to sit next to my bed. I told the nurse outside your room that I was your relative. Seriously, how did you know I was in the hospital? I eyed Pert with a penetrating gaze. Well, I tried to call you. Wanted to invite you to enjoy a glass of wine at my friend's newly opened restaurant. Heck, it was an impromptu invitation at 11 p.m., alright? That's why I didn't tell you beforehand. I tried to call you 5 or 6 times, but you didn't answer. I was worried, so I drove to your home. I met a guard riding a bike, and he said the ambulance had already taken you away. I was shocked, so here I am. Pert reached out to brush away a wisp of hair from my forehead and stared at the wound. I paused a little. What happened? Please tell me. This was my chance. If I told Pert what had happened, he would definitely be able to help me. If the suspect really was someone inside the police department, he would not know that I asked for help elsewhere. Pert was the person I trust the most right now. You heard the news about a woman hung herself in a condominium today, right? I started with a question. Yeah, I know. I have been informed. I saw the news on the internet. Are you the one who performed the autopsy? Pert pulled out his phone, looking for something on the screen. The captain said she had committed suicide after having a fight with her boyfriend. Severe depression, and a suicide note. What else, Bun? What does the news say? I quickly took the phone from Pert. On the screen, an online news website's headline said, "Depressed teacher found hanged in her condo. Might be depression after breakup." In the article, there were photos of Jinja's body wrapped in a white sheet as she was moved onto the ambulance. I skimmed the content of the news until I reached the last sentence. The rescuers have taken the body to the provincial hospital to determine the cause of death. The news did not mention my suspicion of Jinja being murdered. Captain Aim had called me this evening to inquire about the autopsy results, in which I had reported what I found to him. The captain said he did not tell the reporters about my suspicion of Jinja's murder, and that might make the killer become complacent about the success of his staged death. This might even lead to an easier way to apprehend the murderer. The thing is, I took a deep breath, telling Pert what had happened. His attentive gaze gradually morphed into an expression of shock by the minute. When I reached the part where the intruder came in and knocked me out cold in my house, the prosecutor cursed under his breath with irritation. "Holy shit, you're screwed, Bun!" Pert hurriedly pulled out something from his pocket and handed it to me. It was a white smartphone, an older version than the one he gave me to read the news a moment ago. Confused, I took it. Here, you take it. In case there is something urgent, call me or the police. I have Captain Ithipol's number 2. It's in there. This was what I wanted. Are you carrying 2 phones around? Yeah, just a spare phone for calling girls. I don't really need this one. Pert chuckled, as if he was trying to ease the tension in the room. I sighed softly. Do you think I should call Captain? Will he know if I do? He could really be an insider. I admitted that I was so terrified at the moment. Pert had a pensive look in his eyes. Okay, how about this? You don't have to do anything right now. Just lay low. Write an autopsy report accordingly. I'll find a way to tell the police. I have many acquaintances both in and outside. Should be able to find some clues. In the meantime, I'll send my subordinate to be your bodyguard. I'd never seen Pert in such serious demeanor save for when he was working. He reached out to squeeze my shoulders. Take it easy. I won't let anyone hurt you. Sorry to bother you. I felt like I had lifted the weight of the world off my chest. There's nothing more magical than having a sense of security in life. Pert nodded before standing up. Hey, this is a matter of life and death. I can't just sit back and do nothing. If something comes up, call me, Bun. Got it? Now. I'm gonna find someone to watch over you. Thanks, Bunch. I truly appreciated it. After this situation came to an end, I would have to buy him a meal, a big one, no doubt. Shortly after Pert left the room, a young nurse entered to check my temperature and blood pressure. I asked her to turn off the lights before she went out. At this moment, only the dim light crept through the small glass pane on the door into the room, allowing me to see objects inside. I had managed to suspend my stolen phone's number. After that, I lay down, gripping Pert's phone firmly, trying to shut my eyes and sleep. My headache had improved significantly, but I still didn't feel quite right. I was certain that tonight would go smoothly. Some indeterminable amount of time had passed. I woke up with a jolt in the middle of the dark, the dim light outside seeping through, allowing my sight to see the clock on the wall. It was 2:45 a.m. The headache had significantly subsided. It had almost completely vanished. I slowly propped myself up in a sitting position, feeling drowsy, that I was practically unable to keep my balance. A piece of paper dropped from my chest onto my lap. My heart pounded erratically. What is this? My hands were shaking and frigid as I reached for the A4 paper folded in half. I unfolded it slowly. Beautiful handwriting engraved inside. Handwriting still fresh in my memory. Handwriting I had seen only recently. I said, don't tell anyone. You don't like me being nice? Guess I have to teach you a lesson. Say goodbye to Mr. Prosecutor. Oh no. My heart almost stopped beating, seized by the wave of terror. I looked around slowly until my eyes found a silhouette of a man sitting still on the sofa. The only thing I could think of right now was to flee from here as quickly as possible and cry for help. I intended to sit up, but then I felt something was totally off about myself. All my strength evaporated. Only a state of sleepiness remained. I couldn't get out of bed despite my every effort. The shadow rose and approached me swiftly. I tried to turn around to fumble for the call cord and call a nurse, but the shadow easily held my shoulder to lie down in its original position. Even though I tried to shout at the top of my lungs, a big hand clad in black leather glove covered my mouth. If you don't want to die, hold still, the person before me commanded with a resolute voice. I couldn't help but go terribly still in terror. He must have been the same person who broke into my house. I could remember his voice and the way he concealed his face. How can I feel so sleepy in this kind of situation? My eyes flickered to the shadow of the saline bottle at the headboard before I felt my breath hitched. Don't tell me. Just so you know, I didn't want to do this to you, but you brought this upon yourself. He reached for the IVs, adjusting and rotating it deftly. I tried to pry away the hand clasping over my mouth, to no avail. After he adjusted the IV, the intruder took something out of his breast pocket. It was a 4cc syringe containing a clear liquid inside. He moved his hand and pinned my left arm, which was embedded with an IV catheter on my forearm, in place. Despite my struggle, I was unable to stop the injection administered into my vein. The next thing I knew, my eyelids were heavy like leads. A sedative? Diazepam? Midazolam? My consciousness was losing the effect of the drug invading my unwilling body. You have a secret that no one else knows, Doc. The man's voice seemed to echo from a distance. But I know, and I'll use it against you. Hey guys, thank you so much for the support and for listening to these amateur audiobooks of mine. I really, really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say thank you. Please like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Who do you think is the murderer? I know what my theory is, but I'm not gonna tell you yet. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. I will get the next chapter out as soon as I can. Bye!